This is the Smart Buildings Academy podcast with Joe Hulsey, episode 487. Welcome to the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, I have a really good conversation with Don Gillis, senior trainer at Chemours, formerly known as DuPont, the company that, of course, brought you the name that is now synonymous with all refrigerants, Freon, and also their newer product line of low GWP refrigerants called Opteon. So we discussed the regulatory changes that took effect on January 1st of 2025 that address low GWP or low global warming potential refrigerants, and what options are available for contractors and building owners out there, and what you might want to be aware of and educate yourself on moving forward so that you have a plan and don't get caught in a bad situation. All the information covered in this episode can be found on our website at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/487. Hope you enjoy this very informative episode. Hello and welcome to the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. I'm here with my good friend Don Gillis, and we're going to be discussing some of the EPA regulations that took effect on January 1st, kind of the different refrigerants that are involved and how that may impact a lot of the different types of equipment out there that you all may see or be responsible for maintaining. So I'll let Don introduce himself and tell everyone a little bit about himself, what he does, and why he is the man for the job. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe. I obviously work for Chemours. Came on board about 2.5 years ago. Prior to coming to this, I was a technical trainer at Copeland for a handful of years. Got my start approximately 33 years ago. I spent somewhere thereabouts about 25 years in a truck. I'm still a licensed journeyman, so more comfortable turning wrenches up until 8 years ago than I was doing what I was doing now. So started out, literally, I was a laid off factory worker and 33 years ago. And I went down the road when jobs were hard to come to find and went to a Lennox dealership of this little mom and pop place, less than 10 employees. And my first few months was just cleaning up job sites and carrying other people's tools, and started putting myself through school at night, and the rest is history. Somehow I got here. So that's how it all happened. So anything's possible in this industry, right?
That's right. Fantastic. And I've known Don for several years now. I've always known him as a trainer, and he's always done fantastic work back when he was with Emerson and now with Chemours. He often comes down to visit us in Alabama about every July. He does special presentations for us there, amongst some others for HVAC educators, and always been super impressed. And Alabama's not the only place you travel, right? You are kind of the man when it comes to training with Chemours, correct?
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm the man, but so I do travel quite a bit. Yeah. I usually say somewhere around 36, 40 weeks a year, but it's probably closer to 30 to 35 weeks a year now. Slowed down a little bit. And that's by my own choice. I kind of make my own schedule, just like I did at Emerson. I mean, and what I mean by that is if they want, I can pick and choose and say, hey, I don't want to work that week or whatever. So both companies have been very good to me as far as always checking in on me, making sure I'm not getting burnt out and what have you. But I do see a lot of people. In 2023, just because it's on the top of my head, I calculate my own numbers. I've seen over 6,400 and some people in-person training alone in 2023. But that's when the A2L topic was much hotter. It's still a hot topic, but I mean, that's when we're still talking about propane and refrigerants and those kind of things. So there was a lot of, no pun intended, a lot of fires to put out. So
Exactly. Yeah. So you've been around, you've done a lot of training, and Chemours themselves, they've been around for a long time, correct?
2015. So it's Chemours' name is based off chemistry that's ours. So the H is silent. And what is Chemours today used to be DuPont up until 2015. We're a spinoff company, kind of like what Honeywell's doing right now. And basically, so with that said, everything that DuPont owned, the trade name Freon, we always say everything needs a little Freon.
Right.
That's an umbrella trade name over all of our refrigerants. Moving forward, we're going to have a product. You'll start seeing Opteon on our boxes, and that's just simply telling you, Joe, that that's a low GWP refrigerant. Awesome. We'll still have the Freon label, but this will be the lower GWP. We'll be in. They're changing it from a green to a blue. So it
Okay.
may look foreign at first, but Opteon will be the
Opteon is
new.
the new Freon, right? That's what it
That's
boils down to.
correct. That ours,
Opteon is the
Chemours brand, yes.
new. Right,
Hopefully
right.
they do as good as job as they did marketing Freon, because that's we'll
Exactly.
call everything Opteon moving forward.
Yes, but we know it's never going to change. It's always going to be Freon, right?
Freon,
Just put some
yeah,
Freon in it. Cool.
yeah. Just put some Freon on it. Just needs a little Freon.
Exactly. All right. Well, I do appreciate you being on the show. I'm excited to talk about some of this stuff. So I guess we'll start with the basics, why we are where we are. So starting off, effective January 2025, right? That is
Yes.
when the EPA regulations really took effect as far as equipment manufacturers and refrigerant phase down. Is that a correct statement? Did I get that
Um,
right?
yeah, you got it right on the part that yes, you're correct. So January 1st of this year, take comfort cooling for example. No equipment can be made with a GWP higher than 700. So that obviously puts out 410A because it comes in somewhere around 2088. So you really, in the comfort cooling space, you really only have two choices that I'm aware of, and that's R454B and R32. So, and then
Gotcha.
the rooftop units. Now, originally, Joe, and you probably know this, but to share it with your listeners that might not
Hmm.
know, that originally was going to be a hard stop date for not only making the equipment January 1st of 2025, you can no longer do it, but it was also a sell-through date, and it was also through a installation date. And that included rooftop units and package units, things like that. So what happened there was a lot of pushback, and because you could hear the verbiage before
Mm,
2025, like, wow, what is that gonna do to our,
right.
our industry, yada. So anyways, long story short, that's usually doesn't change when the EPA says it's final. It is final. But about 2 months later, somewhere thereabouts, they retract that and gave them a 1 year sell through date and a 1 year installation date. So that
Awesome.
is on the split systems. On the rooftop units and the PTEC, AC, heat pumps, that's till 2028. So the way I do that in class, the way I explain it is, we're tin knockers, or at least that's what I was always accused of being back in the
Hmm.
day. And
Same, same.
we electricians are sparkies. So if a sparky can come up and run electric to it and it runs right out of the factory, or if somebody can plug it in like a PTEC unit, that's 2028. If you have to get the torch
Hmm.
out or connect the dots, erect anything in any shape or form, that's 2026, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. It really does. And thanks for clarifying that. And you're right. I remember kind of the panic mode when they said that there was going to be that hard stop date. Manufacturers are talking about, what are we going to do? We just shut our factories down one day, and start making something else. How do we know when to stop to sell everything we had left over? Same with installs, contractors not being able to put stuff in after that date. Yeah, it was a little bit panicky. So I think they did the right thing in pushing that through, given that 1 year sell through date.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And they had to learn from us, the industry, if you will, that, hey, you're going to
Right.
cripple the economy. And if you ever been to a factory, I know you have, Joe, if you ever been to one of these factories, the OEM factories, you know as well as I do, you can see rooftop units as far as the eye can see.
Right.
So those things don't just fly off the shelf. So once they understood that, it's not like picking up an A coil at the counter. You need a little lead time on that. It's guys like you and me that come into the wholesalers with a blueprint and say, I need 10 of these, I need 5 of these, I need 9 of these for a strip mall. You know what I mean? There's a
Right.
little lead time on that, that getting that stuff to you. So
Yeah, exactly. That larger stuff a lot of time has to be custom built or at least custom assembled there at the manufacturer. So
yeah,
very
curves and
good point.
everything. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so following those lines, what's changing about it is really because of the high GWP phase out, right? We've got the new regulations, they're phasing down HFC refrigerants. So basically that, as you mentioned, we're not getting rid of them, right? We're just phasing down, say 410A, for instance.
Yeah, at a very high level, 2021, we'll say, was our baseline. By
Right.
2036, 15 years later, they want to be down to 15%. So we're going from 100 to 15%. So for example, in 2022, we stepped down to 10. less, 2024, 30% less. And it's just a gradual drop down. And it is a phase down, not a phase out. So it's a slow process. But I want to clarify something because sometimes I see people explain this, and I think they know it, that just sometimes other people listening to them might not know this. And I want to be very clear about this. That step down is HFCs, and HFCs can be anything from insulation foam insulation you put in new homes. It can be in fire hydrants or fire extinguishers. It can be in solvents. It can be in inhalers. So it's based, it's all HFCs. And then one more thing is it's based on its GWP value. So in other words, that first step is called allocations, or how much can I make? How much can Chemours make? How much our competitors can make? So it's based on virgin HFCs based on its GWP value. So in other words, if you have a high GWP value, like 404A is almost 4,000, you're only going to be able to make so much of that. And if you choose to make a lot of it, you're going to use your allocations up before the year ends.
Gotcha.
So you're going to see those lower GWP refrigerants. They're going to, it's like having 2 5-gallon buckets is the way I describe it in class. One bucket's full of golf balls, one bucket's full of tennis balls. I can put a lot more golf balls in my bucket. You know what I mean? That's the low GWP refrigerant. So but it's not just refrigerants, it's HFCs, and it's based on its GWP value of how much you can make.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. That's a really good point, because people think it's just a straight line, but it's really not. There's really a whole lot involved in that, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So speaking of your Opteon and your new low GWP refrigerants, what are we doing as far as replacement refrigerants and the different applications? So how many of them are there? Like, hundreds of them, dozens of them? What's it looking like as far as an industry as a whole right now? In other words, what type of A2L refrigerants are out there, and what are their applications?
Yeah. So the A2Ls, first and foremost, to get this out of the way, all the new A2L refrigerants cannot be used in anything that's out there already. So any of the legacy stuff, you can't, even if the pressures are close, you can't put that new refrigerant, that A2L, mildly flammable, low flame propagation, in the existing systems. It's not designed for it. Obviously, the pressures, even if they're 10 pounds difference, aren't going to be designed for that TXV or that system as a whole. So it would be now, will there be a retrofit kit one day? I have no idea. You never know. I guess just stay tuned. But as far as that goes, now there is drop-in. We use the term drop-in refrigerants on the refrigeration side, and they've been here for a while now. But unfortunately, there's no drop-in or replacement for existing 410A systems at this time. I don't foresee that changing, but I could be wrong.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when you have a system, a large system, maybe with a large leak, obviously 410A is not getting any cheaper. With a phase down, supply and demand dictates it's going to be more and more expensive, right? So when we go to repair versus replace, we've got to weigh that out, right? There is no retrofit, as you said. It's not like with R22 back in the day when we could had all these drop-in replacements and we could change some seals and put in new refrigerants. We're going to have to replace that equipment, or eat the cost of the new refrigerant, right? Which is going to be less and less available.
Well, if it's a repair, if it's something that's, I look at it as it's slightly different, but you're going to have to make your decision based on that person's, financial situation or whatever. But you'll still be able to get components as long as they were manufactured prior to that date. But you'll still have some components out there to be able to units like that. But as far as replacing 410A, it's going to be around a long time. I want to be clear about that, because I've seen a lot of stuff in the last year or so where the sky is falling. That's not necessarily true. I mean, you take R22, for example. We don't buy virgin R22 anymore. We haven't for a long time in the United States. If you're getting it, or if you're buying it illegal. And Mexico still does that, but US does not. So that's reclaimed refrigerant. So the third step of the AIM Act, I jumped the second step. The first step is the allocations. The third step of that is the reclamation part of it. And what that states is things like by 2028, OEMs are using 10% of reclaimed refrigerant in new equipment. Reclaimed refrigerant is going to become very, very valuable. And I know I do judge at quite a few national functions, Skills USA, PHCC. And I sometimes have that station where the best of the best come and they're hooking up for the recovery part of it. We need to, if there's a counter days with a recovery equipment manufacturer, really get your folks in there, do in-house training. If somebody knows, take the lead guy and do that. And here's why, Joe. Originally on that first step, I told you that was virgin.
Mm-hmm.
Reclamation refrigerant isn't penalized like that. It's already been penalized once. So in my lifetime, you'll never see a bigger change in how we look at recovery refrigerant ever again.
Wow.
The Hudsons of the world, the Summits of the world, all these recovering manufacturers, they're hiring for every position known to man. They're adding facilities. Wholesalers
Right.
that used to not take refrigerant are now going to be taking it. There's value in there, and they're telling everybody in front of me on panels, large panels at big functions, you bring your refrigerant to me, I'll buy it. So prior to that, in my era, your era, we never really had an incentive to really recover refrigerant. But now they're telling us they have the technology to take dirty refrigerant, even refrigerant with dye in it, and pulling it out of there and bringing it back to like new. So that's a whole different spin on this, and they're telling everybody about it. So reclamation is going to be a big deal. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but between 410A, and you're right, as time goes on, 454B, R32, the price, once that newness wears out and this equipment becomes more common, that price will shift, just like we've seen with 22 and 410A. And then 410A will probably bump up there a little bit, but you always have that reclamation. But so to keep the cost down, folks, recover your refrigerant. Okay, recover your refrigerant, and if you're a small company, because of this new value to it they're putting on, they're telling everybody, bring your refrigerant, I will buy it. There is some value there. If you're a small company, it might pay for a Christmas party. If you're a big company, from what I'm hearing, you might buy 2 brand new vans a year. Wow. So you're just watch that. I'm not a gambler, but I know a little bit from listening to others a lot smarter than me in that arena, and it's going to be a big change here.
Yeah, that was a pretty bold statement to say we're going to see the biggest change in recovery, because I'm like you. In the past, when there was no incentive there, it was just a burden. Nobody wanted to do it. Take the Sawzall, blow and go. Cut that line loose. But yeah, that's really interesting. You monetize it, and that'll be interesting to see. And good, good that we can recover it, continue using it. And it's nice to see that they've got the technology where they can clean up that dirty refrigerant. That was always a really big deal, and it still is. We still want to keep it as pure as possible. But the fact that they can still take it, that is a little bit reassuring.
Yeah, great point. Is the tank of 410A solely by itself worth more? Absolutely. But as Hudson's and the different ones of the world that are in that arena, I've heard them say many a times in front of very large crowds. Like I said, I've seen it with my own 2 eyes multiple times back to back, where they're telling people, they're referring to it as digital technology, whatever digital looks like, but they're saying they can go in there and pull out each one of those if by chance you do mix it, and pull it out and bring it back to virgin. But again, being that there's very little emissions to recover that or reclaim that refrigerant and recycle it back out, it doesn't get as penalized nearly as much as virgin refrigerant. So you're seeing a lot of people, even startup companies, getting into that arena, because if they're not getting penalized for it, then the AIM Act, that first step, really has no effect on them. You can sell as much as you want. So just stay tuned on that, because you're going to see a big move that direction.
Yeah, very good point. So if you're one of the larger mechanical contractors, take note of that. Start recovering, because that's going to be another financial revenue generator for you right there. Good point. So moving on, talking about some of the larger mechanical contractors out there, as far as larger equipment that you'll see, maybe chillers or any maybe just the larger RTUs. Are you using different refrigerant in those different applications? I know 454B, I've been hearing about it for several years. We know that it is a blend of R32 and 1234YF, correct? I get my numbers at, my numbers and my letters mixed up sometimes. You'll have to excuse me for that. So I know those are the common ones. I know to replace 410A, that's what we'll see mostly, 454B or R32. What about in some of the chillers, high pressure versus low pressure? Do you guys have different chemicals designed for those, and kind of what's the difference?
Yeah. So great question. So this product's been out there for a while. So let's start with low, medium temperature stuff, refrigeration and chillers, Joe. Refrigerants like R22 and medium and low temp, 404A are common, 407A, those 407F. I could go on and on. That there is a replacement for that. Our product is R449A, and then the Honeywell product is 448A. So you'll see both of them. Those will, and there's a little bit of change over there, but not a lot. Now, when it comes to the R22 and things like that, you're going to have mineral oil compared to POE oil. So there will be some flushes there, changing out and cleaning up and those kind of things.
Just to reiterate, are these drop-in replacements?
Yes.
Retrofit applications?
Yeah. So just to clarify, drop in, and I know we were giggling about this earlier, is we're pulling the old charge out, obviously, starting new. If it's mineral oil to PO oil, obviously we're taking all the oil out, cleaning the system up. And yes, it is considered a drop-in refrigerant. So,
or a retrofit refrigerant. I'm not sure if that's a better term.
That's the one I like the best.
Yeah.
That's the one I like the best. You're speaking my language now. That's the one I like the best.
Right. I guess,
yeah.
I was going to say, the point for me is that you don't have to replace the whole equipment. You can go back with the lower GWP refrigerant. Unlike 410A, when you're going 454B and the A2Ls, then you will have to replace equipment. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, big move here, Joe. We see it. I hear about it through the sales team. Obviously, I'm not in sales, but I'm privy to those conversations sometimes. Big move, big demand. We sell a lot of it now. I'm sure our competitors are too. So you take 404A, for example, that GWP is almost 4,000. GWP is what everything's based on, that global warming potential. How much emissions does it put in the atmosphere? Okay, you compared to 449, which is 1282. And it's still an A1 classification. So it's not mildly flammable. You're putting in the same flammability and you're lessening that by, quite a bit, almost 2,000 GWP, which is a big deal. Huge deal.
Very big. And thank you for clarifying that, because I often use the terms A2L and low GWP interchangeably.
Yeah.
And that's not correct. I need to break that habit. Because thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've made the mistake myself. And when I talked to you earlier about the new refrigerant from us on the low GWP will be Opteon. That's not just A2Ls. That's like your 449s. That's like your 513s. That'll say Opteon on it because it's a low GWP refrigerant, not necessarily A2Ls, but lower GWP.
Gotcha. So do you know what most manufacturers are putting in, say, just a traditional medium or high pressure chiller? Is it going to be something like 454B, R32?
On the chiller side, you're going to see for refrigeration, air conditioning, chillers, you're going to see 513. Moving forward on the new equipment, you can see for air conditioning, you'll see 1234IF. That's in a smaller charge, like underneath the hood of your car. As far as air conditioning, chillers, heat pumps, those kind of things, unfortunately, like I said earlier, we have two options out there. That's 410A and R32, and at this time, there's no replacement for that. So air conditioning, chillers for R22, 407C, 422D, those kind of things. We really don't have anything for that right now. That's going to be new equipment too. That's going to be so 454B, our series has, I don't want to make this a sales or marketing pitch here to you, but Honeywell's numbers are 455, I believe. Ours is 454.
Gotcha.
And so just so you know, there's an A, B, and C, and it can get a little confusing, but they're the same components. They're all made of R32 and 1234AF. It's literally they're changing the ratio of how low do you want to go on that SST, or that suction saturation temperature, your evaporator. How cold do you want the box? So B is used for comfort cooling or air conditioning solely, and then chillers also. And then 454A is used in medium low temp, and also 454C is. The difference there is the way the AIM Act or the EPA's drawn this up is, if it's below 200 pounds, you can only have a GWP of less than 150. That's where we're going to use 454A. They changed the ratio. If it's a larger charge, we decided we needed something for that template also. We changed the ratio of the refrigerant for the components in 454C, and that's a GWP of like 148, 138, and it's
Okay.
below that 150. So anything at 200 pounds is the
Interesting.
marker.
Gotcha.
Under 200 pounds, it has to be less than 300. Above 200 pounds, less than 150, and I'm talking about GWP. So that's why
Right.
there's two choices in medium low temp on new equipment.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Makes total sense. Yeah. So I appreciate that. So I guess if we had a message for any of the building owners with a lot of equipment, or if you're a contractor responsible for keeping up all this equipment, right? It would probably be to be aware of which refrigerants go in which applications and maybe have a plan going forward. Um, in case, you have a failure, are you looking at replacement or are you looking at repair, running those cost analysis? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. You said it just like I would say. It comes down to what we've really, in my opinion, what we do. Now you've got the EPA playing a little bit of role as far as GWP, because keep in mind these retrofit refrigerants I was talking about,
Hmm.
there's a threshold there too for replacement refrigerants, and that's why we have it out there. So and when I mean out, we have options. So there's 449, like I said. 513 is a great choice. It's a perfect choice for 134A. And I'm not just saying that because it's a
Gotcha.
Chemours product. As I told you before we started this conversation, I was already talking about it at Copeland, because what I like about 513 as a retrofit, it is you don't have to change anything on it, literally the TXV or the head. Where 449, if you're going to 404A or R22, there's some changes there. 404A is a nice one because it's literally just the head of the TXV. Where mineral oil, because of R22 is mineral oil, then
Hmm.
that's a change oil, that's a flush, and that's a
Right. Yeah.
cleanup process, but still not that bad, really. But yeah, so getting back to your question, there is you're going to have to weigh it out with them. You're going to have to weigh your options out. You're going to probably need to know. The decision makers need to know what's going on with the EPA, those kind of things, like what other options are, and the wholesalers will know what that option is, because I've been taking those calls for 2 years and I'm not even in tech support. Like, hey, I'm looking at this refrigerant and it's got a real low GWP. Why can't I use it? Oh, that one. Yeah, that's for mobile use only. That's why the
Gotcha.
GWP. So, it looks almost identical like 404A, but unfortunately the GWP is such where it's going to only go in the mobile transport. And on that note too, Joe, all this is based on line sizes. So the longer the line
Hmm.
size, 400-foot supermarkets like that, that's why you see a lot of people going to transcritical CO2 systems or CO2
Right.
systems,
Right.
is the less options you're going to have, because that GWP level, more opportunity for leaks or on the refrigerant or below the charge, the smaller, the less the GWP is going to be. So actually, air conditioning is the highest GWP of all of them. A lot of folks don't realize that, it's 700. That is the largest one because it's the smallest line set or smallest charge typically.
Hmm. Interesting. Gotcha. Yeah. Really good information right there. So I've learned a lot. I didn't realize there were so many retrofit applications out there for the different low GWP refrigerants.
Mhm.
Any last things before we go that maybe a tech should know about any of the A2Ls as far as, safe handling or tools? I think by now most techs should be pretty well trained on it. We've beat to death the fact it's not propane. It's not an A3. It's not blowing up. It's just slightly more flammable than say your regular 410A.
Yeah.
Any just kind of finishing thoughts on just how to handle those, or anything you think needs to be hit on again?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, get training, even though it's not required by the EPA. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there that you have to do that. You don't have to do it. It's just going to be like 410A, but get training. We're big about training here. We do it for free. That's unheard of. We don't charge anything. You get a certificate of completion, and make yourself aware of those small things, like you and I both know, Joe. I know you've been to those trainings. I've been to many of them myself and given many of them too. But
Mhm.
as far as tools goes, we've been pleasantly surprised. A lot of the stuff you got in your truck really doesn't need to change. But I need you to do your own homework. All of you out there listening, go to your wholesaler or go to the tool manufacturer themselves. Everyone's doing a great job of going to their websites. They got an A2L button. Hit the A2L button. There's a drop down, and you'll I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised, as I said, to see that those older models are okay for A2Ls.
Right.
They tested them, and now will you see things changing like brushless motors? Yeah, you will. But we were already seeing that. You know what I mean? So get your knowledge, know your rules. If you're licensed like myself, I'm under the international mechanical codes. I still carry my journeyman's card. You need to know what the codes are now. And last but not least, Joe, the biggest thing I can say is if you were already using good practice, what used to be good practice is now some of those things are going to be required. Some of that, like removing residual refrigerant after you cut the line open, that's always been good practice. Now it's going to be required. You're going to see a lot more documentation on the job site as far as the equipment. The UL has made the manufacturers put a decal on there, many decals of, documenting this and putting the pressure, what you added charge, that is required now. So, and you have to hold that pressure test for a whole hour now, unlike before where there really wasn't a time frame, at least not that I was aware of. So just some high level stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Real quick, the fact that they're making you document that, I think is very important because it's so hard as an instructor, this, when you're trying to teach people best practices, but they get out in the field and no one else is doing it and they're like, well, it's not really worth it. Well, now they kind of have to, right? How do you know you're really pulling your vacuum down to 500? And an inspector doesn't know that unless they're on the job site. And of course they can still pencil whip it, but at least maybe they're being forced to write it down. So,
well, as fast as the world's moving with technology and QR codes, I know they're really stringent where I'm at, where my son's license at down the road. They're under the IMC. They inspect everything, and they're great guys, but they don't show any lenience. If something fails, it fails. They flag it. I'll come back tomorrow and check it out again. The way I see this is, because the first thing out of someone's thought process is kind of like back in the day. Well, who's going to catch me venting for refrigerant? Well, who's going to catch me if I didn't pull a vacuum? Or who's going to catch me? I'm telling you right now, you don't want that for your liability. You don't want to hurt anyone. You don't want to hurt anyone else. And if something should happen, God forbid, and they come out, fire marshal, and says, hey, the leak was here, even though the refrigerants are so closely identical, personally, I see QR codes coming in some way where, if you don't have a building department or something like that, it might be your volunteer fire department out in a town that only has one stoplight. You know what I mean?
right.
So I see them taking this to the next level, like they're already trying to do on that third step of the AIM Act of putting QR codes on the tanks. It's not really a big brother thing. It's just keeping everybody honest. Instead of just out there like the Wild West, if you will.
Right. Absolutely. Well, great conversation, great points. I learned a lot from it. So, once again, I appreciate you showing up and having this conversation with me, and also look forward to hopefully seeing you this July at our annual meeting once again.
Yeah, I hope so, Joe. It's always good seeing you. You're a good man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. We hope you learned from this episode. I know I sure did. If you found this episode valuable, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn, please share this with your network so that we can all grow together. As always, this will be available on our website at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com